Okay. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
All right. There's just one more thing I'd like to add to our discussion about Andrew Galambos.
Okay, would love to.
All right. So I asked you for a summary of his theory of volitional science, but I don't feel like we did a good job of answering that. So for the benefit of those who have never heard of volitional science, is it possible for you to define it or just sum it up briefly?
Briefly.
I know, but
I can give
what
some,
is it like? Just the gist of it.
the gist of it. You had mentioned that question. You were going to ask that question, so I've been thinking about it for a while. I can give a kind of an analogy. It's actually a corollary to what the idea is behind volitional science, in that we have developed a society, the ones that have prospered, through developing physical property, cars and airplanes and houses and that sort of thing. And I would like to talk a little bit about that and what kind of gave rise to that. And then I'll compare that. And actually, volitional science includes that, but in many ways is a minor aspect of the volitional science. Volitional science. So,
all right.
Let's suppose you start out and you're making something, okay? And you go about, let's say you make chairs, and you're making nice chairs that are beautiful and comfortable and that sort of thing. And you start making chairs, and you turn out chairs, and then people like them and they start to buy them. And so you keep working and selling chairs and more chairs and more chairs until finally, after, let's say, 3 years of selling chairs, you've, in addition to all the cost of living, you've saved up enough money to now go out and buy an automobile or a car. And let's say this is way, way, way back when cars were just first coming out. So you buy a car, and you've spent 2-3 years working to get this car. And now you have the freedom that comes with the car. And you have the car for a week, and you can now drive to the grocery store, and you can go to the movie theater, and you have freedoms that you didn't have before, all right? And you park it out in front of the grocery store, and you leave it outside. And after a first week, you come out, and let's say you're coming out of a the movie theater, and you look, and you said, I parked my car right there.
Uh-oh.
Okay, and it's not there. Okay.
Yep.
So you contact the police.
Yeah.
And you say, my car is missing. I'd like to have my car back. And let's suppose, instead of how they generally act now, okay, we'll take the information, we'll look for it, and we'll try to get it back and that sort of thing. Who cares? Yeah, well, so. And then you say, well, I'd like my car back. Well, that's tough reasons, It's nice. And then let's say you go, oh, okay. And then a week later, they find your car. It was a new car. And someone took it. And obviously they took it. And they drove it, and they beat the hell out of it. Tires are flat, the engine barely runs, and all of the rest of that. And you say, well, this is not my car. My car was new, and now it's all beat up. Who cares? And you call up the supposed insurance company. Oh, well, that's your problem. Now, I want to ask you a question. Are you going to... You spent 2 years of hard work, and you've been turning out chairs. What is that going to do the next week you go to work?
Well, that would be kind of demoralizing. I wouldn't want to go to work, because what would be the point?
Exactly. And people call up, and they've given you a little money to pay for chairs, and they've given you orders and all that. And you're going to go, well, I've given chairs to the community, and I get nothing back. And they say, that's, tough luck, but I need my chairs. Why bother? I'll make enough chairs. I'll make enough to live on, but I'm gonna reduce my efforts. I mean, why bother? It's going to be demoralizing. So what allowed, and now imagine if this happens to everybody. How do you have a car industry? How do you have cars? How do you have things if you work hard to produce them and then exchange them in a marketplace on a voluntary basis, and the next week they're gone?
Yeah, okay. I know you're getting at something because that's not the normal response we get from the police or the insurance company.
Oh, I know. But what I'm trying to say is that if that was the attitude, you wouldn't have a car industry because people wouldn't work.
Right.
So what came first, and it took a long time to build this environment of you've got to respect the tangible goods or no one's going to have them.
Okay.
And it started a long time ago. And why did England prosper? It took a long time, but they were the first ones to take the common law and began to break down the old structures of the feudalism of the Middle Ages and began to respect property, tangible property, the use of land, all the rest of it. And so what happens is that you get tangible goods because there's a respect and a mechanism to protect those tangible goods. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And now that was talking about a car, but imagine you have a workshop. And you took you years to get it right, and then some vandals come in and destroy it. And no one in the community does anything. Well, repeat that enough times, and you're back to the Stone Ages. So if you look around in this world, we have airplanes and we have cars and we have all of these things. One aspect of this is because there developed a realization that you've got to protect people's things. If there isn't protection, there isn't the expansion and the growth. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you read to me the last time, that same person that probably wrote that and who put those criticisms out about professor and intellectual property, I'm sure that when he goes out into the parking lot or she walks out in the parking lot and their car is missing, I bet they scream bloody murder. And if the money disappears in their bank accounts or their house is vandalized, wait a moment, that's mine.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. But let's face it, cars, even manufacturing facilities, what are they all built on?
Science? Industry?
You got it. What is science but accumulated ideas of individuals that put a lot of time and effort to figure it out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what happens. We came a hair's breadth away from not getting Isaac Newton's Principia.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Okay. You've heard of Halley, right?
Yes.
And it was Halley that got it. Why was Newton so reluctant to publish?
Ridicule, maybe? I don't know. He was afraid of he wouldn't be taken seriously, something like that.
Well, you're on the course. He did three things, and we'll talk about Newton later in more depth. But the first thing he published was not his Principia. It was his book on optics. And it went against the Middle Ages concepts of the Middle Ages of how light worked and all the rest of it. There were a whole lot of hodgepodge ideas. But Newton did a whole series of experiments. And as soon as he published it, he was criticized and chastised and all the rest of it. And he said, enough isn't enough. I think he said something to the effect, as soon as I can get away from this mistress called philosophy, this contentious mistress, I'm never going to come back. And then Newton came along and had worked all this out about this, what we now call the system of the world. And he was going to die. He was going to take it to his death. And then along came Holly and caught him at the right moment, gave him encouragement, and produced it. Now, before anybody comes along and says, oh, well, someone else will do it, that's a very dangerous position to take, because it took literally 100 years, almost 100 years, for the next generation of individuals to take what Newton did and make the next major step into it. So for 90 years, no one understood it. And it was sitting there. And finally, the next generation came along and they did the work, and that laid the groundwork of thermodynamics, which then really began the industrial revolution and all the rest of it. And they already had the template. They had everything worked out for them. But if Newton hadn't done it, it may have been 1,000 years. That was so fundamental and so rudimentary. And all of this I'm telling you is what professors told in all of his classes. And so it is how happy are the individuals like Newton to put out their ideas. If you say, well, I get to keep my car, but Newton can't control his ideas, and he has some wild, crazy ideas like, I don't want my ideas used to blow up the human race.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he can't control his because it's so universal and so widespread that, you can't, when that comes to you, you're a good communist. When it comes to your car, that's different. You're a good, I'll use the word capitalist. We'll discuss capitalism and free market in the future, and I will use capitalism negatively right now. And for example, the present politicians are talking about more communism, but you listen to all of them and they are all good capitalists when it comes to their property and their homes and their houses. But it's communism for everybody else. And so everybody's a good capitalist when it comes to their tangible goods. But then when it comes to the great things, the things that gave rise to civilization, and there are so few that can really do it well, and they impact everybody. Those according to their needs. I mean, those according to their abilities, and there are a hell of very few of them. And then those according to their needs. I desperately need Newton's theory so I can build a better car, or a better tank, or a better hydrogen bomb. I need, please, I need. And Professor said, you want to survive? You have to deal with the greater property, the intellectual property, with the same respect that you expect from your automobile. Now, there is a hell of a lot of difference between tangible goods and intellectual goods, and that's why Professor's theory is so long and so involved. And it is developed from a postulatory structure based on observational realities. Now, what he was saying is that it took a long time to build an environment that allowed us to have physical goods. Once you can protect those physical goods, then the physical goods come into existence. Well, there's a little bit more to that because you also have to have the knowledge that comes in. But now you want to solve the big problems of the world, we need to produce create the same environment that exists for physical goods that now needs to be existent for intellectual achievements. For example, everybody is worried and frustrated now, all up in arms about diesel, gasoline and fossil fuels, and all that we'll deal with another time as well.
Right.
But suppose there was a man who has an idea for a new engine. And this engine could be very easily built. Take some effort, work it out. But could be run on a new kind of fuel. and we won't dive into climate change and all that. But ultimately, we are going to run out of petroleum coming out of the earth. So we eventually are going to have to change how we power our civilization and transportation. So it's inevitable that we have to change it. Let's suppose there is this man who has this new engine. And he looks out on the world. And he sees everybody gets to keep their tangible goods. But the moment it comes to intellectual property, once you create it, you've got to give it to us because we need.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that makes that individual feel?
Well, I would think he doesn't want to give it up, and he doesn't want to innovate any further. He's done.
He's done. And think of all the problems that we face. The first thing you have to do is innovate, then implement. Everybody is protecting implementation, but you don't want to protect the innovation process. And so that's the solution the professor brings. Using the concept of science, the philosophy that gave rise to science, that gave us physics and all that. And what we have to do is we have to build first the protective environment to make this happen. So, what I want to make sure is that this is the psychological motivation for it, and this is what I want to get across. This is how the species can go to the stars. This is that the next step in cultural evolution is we have to extend the kind of protections we've given to the tangible goods to the intellectual goods. And that, I will not deny, is a much more difficult problem. And that's why Professor took so long in V50 and V201 to discuss all of this. But he gave us the foundations. The engineering, the base engineering, the science and engineering, and a lot of the technological requirements to make this happen have already been done by the man. But that's what it's all about. Does that help?
Intellectual property.
Intellectual property.
Okay. Anything more?
Oh, heavens, there's always more. But
Well, that fits under the heading of summary. I mean, do you have anything more about it that you want to share, or does that pretty well do it for you?
Well, I'll again stress the point that it's no one's fault, okay, that where we are right now. It's just the natural evolution of the process. But, and there's some discussions that given enough time, would there develop a protective mechanism for intellectual property come about? And going back to the work of Adam Smith and the Scottish Enlightenment, they had a concept of spontaneous order. And that was what was one of the basic ideas of Fable of the Bees. And there is a possibility that if we could behave reasonably well with advanced technologies, that eventually what Professor was proposing may, by its superior capacities to benefit and increase the happiness of human race, it might come about. The problem is we don't know how to behave. And so there has to be a speed up of that process. We can't sit around and wait 10 generations before our psychological and our moral character catches up with our technology. I don't think it's going to work that way, and Professor did not think so. So we now have to have a deliberate effort to establish a new protective moral foundations to this in order to assure that we get there. And so this is not a blame game. Professor never blamed anyone. He just said the next step in this, if we want to survive, we've got to build the protective mechanisms for primary property. And once you do that, then all of the problems that are facing protection of tangible goods will also resolve themselves.
Okay, we'll talk later about how that might come about.
Yes.